Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Just think, there you are cruising along, just enjoying your day. Life's been good. You're making pretty good money. You're driving a nice car. You're married to the perfect person. Then all of a sudden one thing happens. The economy turns. The next thing you know, you're not making as much money anymore. Pretty soon you can't keep up with your car payments, your mortgage payments. Pretty soon maybe even your partner even comes up to you and says, this just isn't working for me. I've found somebody else. And it just keeps going downhill from there. Alas, what is one to do with themselves? Should they trudge forward wondering if things will ever get better, or does it just keep spiraling downward? Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is national best-selling author Daphne Kingman, and she's got a book out simply titled The 10 Things to Do When Your Life Falls Apart. This is a hands-on guide for those times when life becomes so overwhelming and difficult that maybe you can just find a way to do something about it. I'd like to welcome on our program today our guest, Daphne Kingman. Daphne Kingman, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you, Daniel. It's a joy to be with you.
You bet. Fun book to read through. There's no doubt about that. But, as you go through this, one of the chapters to me that really stood out was persistence.
Oh,
and that's exactly what you need to have is persistence and perseverance, because all of these bad times really, truly are temporary.
That's true. And while they're temporary, they often go on for quite a while. So you got to persist. And persistence, I think, is kind of an old-fashioned word almost. We're kind of in the high-speed lane of life. And I think people do need to be reminded that persistence is required. Got to keep doing it and doing it again and keep on doing it even when you feel like you're kind of falling over, and get up and do it again. And that's really what takes you through the crisis.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's really interesting, Daphne, because usually when people face a crisis, at least for some anyway, the one thing you talk about in your book is, hey, when it gets overwhelming, maybe the only thing you can do at the moment is just cry. And that seems to be one of those things that in a world today is something that they say, well, maybe you don't want to do that. It doesn't show that you're tough enough. But actually, I think it's the toughest people that cry the most.
I couldn't agree with you more, Daniel. And I think that, I'd like to even say that's especially true for men. And, of course, in our culture, men are taught to, keep a stiff upper lip and maintain control and everything. And yet I always say it's only a real man who can cry, because there's dignity and healing and, a return to balance when you let all those feelings out. Then you can come back and do all the things that actually need to be done.
Mm-hmm. Now, Daphne, you conduct workshops pretty much around the world, and you've been a 6-time guest on Oprah Winfrey. It's obvious that the work that you've embodied has an appeal to a great many people. So I guess the question here is, what is it about our world where people are drawing to this kind of work? Where did we kind of maybe slip off to where something like this can be so useful?
Oh, what a great question, Daniel. Well, I think we've had a number of years of pretty flush times, especially in the United States, and I think we've had the feeling that we are in control and that we can make things exactly the way we want them, that all we have to do is apply the law of attraction or fulfill our potential or, get the credit card or get the loan. I mean, there's been a lot of very high living and optimistic thinking, and I think that, we've seen a lot of big changes, not just individual changes, like people have always gone through crisis, of course, but I think there's kind of an overriding wave of crisis or cloud of crisis that we're seeing. And so, I've worked for many years with people in relationships. I've written a dozen books about love and relationships, but it was because of what I was seeing coming up in people's relationships. You talked about it in the introduction, and all this stuff is going on, and now your beloved says goodbye, I think I've fallen in love with somebody else. So I've seen the stress of crisis in relationship, and it just felt time to write this book because I think people are looking for answers. In times of crisis, people just feel so emotionally overwhelmed, like paralyzed. And that's what I observed in the people I was working with. And so I wanted to, offer some insight, some sort of landmarks in this, kind of swamp of crisis that people get into.
It really is fascinating, too, because I think sometimes people tend to believe that life is linear, that you just follow a certain set of steps and everything should be A-okay. But life, especially for those of us who have approached midlife, we begin to realize isn't as linear as we once thought it was.
That's a great point, Daniel. That is so true. It's like I always say, you have control until you lose control.
Right,
right. And I think that is true. As we get older, we see that, life is composed of the unexpected as well as the intended. And that's very, very affecting. And it's also these moments of the unexpected, when we have an opportunity to grow. That's the positive part of it. And, these wake-up calls that kind of set us on our heels. It's like, wow, I got to do something different here, or what's being asked of me here. And so it's that resilience and, there are a lot of things that come up in a time of crisis, of course, connecting with our strengths and, connecting with our feelings and learning some new things, but it's quite a journey.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's really fascinating, too, and you talk about this in your book, The 10 Things to Do When Your Life Falls Apart, is that as you go through these experiences and as you talk about integrating the experiences that you have, both good and bad, that really shapes the unique character of who you are. Now, I would like, if you could, to share with our listening audience what it means to integrate the experience. What does that outcome look like?
Oh, that is so important, Daniel. Integrating it means that you take it into your perceptual reality about your life. It's like, when a terrible thing happens, sometimes we just want to deny it or forget it. It's like, no, I didn't really get that DUI. No, I didn't really have that car accident. No, my husband didn't really leave me. It's like we want to kind of put that stuff on the shelf and pretend it didn't happen. And integrating it means that you take it into your conscious reality of what has gone on in your life. And when you do that, it's like you store it in your storehouse of memories. And you also, at that same time, because you're keeping it with you, you allow yourself to benefit from the lesson that comes from it. Yes, I got the DUI. Now I'm saying that to myself as a person who's going to AA and making a transformation in my life. Mm-hmm. Yes, I did have that car accident when I was talking on my cell phone. I'm never going to do that again. Yes, my husband did leave me. I'm not going to be bitter about that or forget about that, but I'm going to take the steps to rebuild my new life as a person who is actually single. So integration is really holding the truth of what happened inside yourself in a way that allows you to move on and to enlarge yourself afterward.
That's, and I don't think sometimes people truly understand the power of integration to really claim responsibility for anything that's happened. And to give you an example, a couple of years ago we had Alan Liu on our program. I believe, no, I'm sorry, that's the wrong name. His name eludes me now, but anyway, he was, I guess, call it the creator of the Hawaiian Ho'oponopono.
Oh, yes.
And he was fascinating, to talk to because of the fact that he says, do you ever notice that any experience that you have, whether it's good or bad, you're always there? And he says the first thing you do, what Hawaiian Ho'oponopono says, is that you simply claim responsibility for it. It doesn't matter whether somebody's jerked you around and screwed you, like, for instance, the American perception of that's what Wall Street has done and the government's bailed these guys out while the rest of us have lost a bunch of money. But the fact is, you lost money because you participated in that.
Exactly.
You did that.
Exactly.
See, and that's so funny to realize that once you take responsibility for anything that goes on in your life, that seems kind of liberating. Wouldn't you agree?
It's so liberating. It's like a wave of cool air, you know.
It's like life gets easier.
Yes, it is,
way.
because you're not spending all this energy defending yourself against something that really did happen. It's like you can just relax and hold it. And that, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's such a beautiful example. And there's an amazing story, too, about the Dalai Lama that he talked about, you know, a young monk that he was training, and the monk became so depressed and overwhelmed by all the practices, you know, the demands of the sacred practice, that he ended up committing suicide. And the Dalai Lama was telling this story, and then somebody said to him, "How did you ever get over it?" And he said, "I have not gotten over it." Mm-hmm. And I think that's, you know, that's that saying, yes, obviously it's not running my life, but I'm holding that in my awareness. That happened. That's true. That's part of my life experience. It's in my heart. It's in my awareness. And so that's very, very important for all of us, because from that holding, from that taking in and bringing inside our consciousness comes new behavior and expansion of our spirits, really.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really fascinating. It was a good few years ago. There was a coworker that I was working with who discovered Christianity, if you will. She was in her 30s, and it's interesting how people discover spirituality or religion as they get a little bit older in life. You know, they were probably steeped in it as kids, but then they separate it, and then all of a sudden, you know, things begin to happen, and they realize, maybe I need to go to church and become religious, whatever the case is. And so she's going about her business doing this, and we would have talks from time to time, and she says, you know, I just don't feel any happier. And I thought to myself, what was your expectation in going to church and finding God? To make you totally happy about everything? We're not meant to be happy all the time, but it's how we deal with the unhappiness that really matters.
So true, so true. And I think that, you know, you were asking earlier, how did this book come to be needed or be so well received? And I think it's because we don't have our muscles developed for how to deal with difficult times. We've kind of been in a lull, you know, like there is some, I think there's been a lot of stuff written and sold to people about, you know, you can have everything you want. All you have to do is flick a finger or say the right thought or have the right intention, and everything's going to be magically perfect. You know, it's like, and that's not true. But because we've been talking about that so much, we've kind of lost the muscle of our resilience, of our coping qualities, of our, you know, strength, of our persistence.
Mm-hmm. Well, for those of you who really want to understand that, go into business for yourself.
Right.
In fact, you know, let's take a look at you as an example. I mean, here you've written bestsellers, you're out on speaking engagements, you're doing seminars, and you have an impact on a lot of lives. But when you decided to start on this journey, it wasn't as linear as most people might think.
That is certainly true.
Why don't you go ahead and describe that for us?
That is certainly true, Daniel. Well, you know, I decided to write a book about crisis, right? So I have a good place that I always go to write, and I went there. I was very tired when I got there, and I thought, well, I'm not going to start writing right away. I'm going to give myself a day off and go for a walk on the beach, and then so I rested the first night, and the next day I got up and I went out to my rental car. It said, okay, I'm ready to go to work. Where's my computer? And I looked down on the floor of the car, and the computer, my computer, and the entire outline for the book, which was not in the computer and which I did not have copied on any flash drive anywhere on the planet, all had been stolen.
Oh, wow.
And it was sort of like the kickoff. It's like, okay, lady, you want to write a book about crisis? Well, try this. You know, try this on. See how you like it.
This will be chapter 1.
That's right.
You got it all figured out, do you?
Yeah, right. So it was an incredible initiation. You know, it's like here the very thing that I was talking about was happening to me. And I cannot tell you, I mean, many, many things happened during the writing of this book, starting off with that, of course, which meant that I had to completely reframe, start all over again. The writing of it. It's like one time when I went up for a meeting around the book, I was driving home very peaceably, and a huge deer ran into my car. I mean,
Wow.
It's a miracle that I wasn't killed. And, there were other things that happened. The IRS decided this would be a great year to audit me, and not just audit me for 1 year, but while we're at it, how about 3? Let's
Really?
just look at your whole life since time began. So it's like, that all ultimately came out very well, but just the magnitude of, the time and energy and going through all that and pulling that all together and shaking in my boots, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just, it was really a process of saying, okay, now I have to persist through this, and now I have to accommodate this, and now I have to regroup around that, and now I have to surrender that. And of course, basically, those are the things that I'm teaching people in the book, that there's, we do have to surrender, we do have to let go, we do have to connect with our strength, we do need to persist, and all of these are, part of the 10 things that I've observed, and now at very first hand from going through it, fresh, hot off the press, that these are kind of the 10 things that I observe people always going through or needing to pay attention to when they are going through a crisis.
Now, I know you just mentioned letting go, and that's a really important aspect in life, because sometimes, especially when you see relationships where one partner decides, I'm going to leave this, I just don't think it's working out, or there may be an ultimatum, if you don't do these things, then I'm leaving. And I actually seen this happen with a friend of mine. So apparently, he was getting off the drinking, and I guess he was a light recreational drug user. He lost 25 pounds, and she just wanted to keep going in the direction of, I don't know if I really want to be in this marriage. And I figured out for myself, it was just, for me through experience, I thought once she made that choice, it doesn't matter what you're going to do. She's not going to stick around. It's just the way it is.
Right.
But it's interesting when a situation like that happens where there's that hope the partner's going to stay there. And so you hold on it and you share the story as though it's going to work out for you, and it just doesn't.
Right, that's holding on as opposed to letting go, isn't it?
Exactly. Now talk about why that's important. You gave a great story in there, in fact, of a guy who was a magazine editor, I believe it was, who just had his place that was actually the Live Simply thing. But let's get back to the letting go here.
Well, the letting go, of course, is so important. Again, we live in a culture that doesn't want to let go. I think people always find it hard to let go, this culture or any other. I shouldn't pick on our culture. But, letting go is kind of antithetical to our trip here. We want to hang on. We want to have more. We want things to be the way they were. We want the person to stay with us. By the way, I want to mention here that about letting go of relationships. One of my books about relationships is called Coming Apart, Why Relationships End and How to Live Through the Ending of Yours, which really talks about that letting go process for a relationship specifically. I just want to mention that for people who are going through the anguish of that letting go. But it's very hard to let go, and sometimes people ask me, well, how can you let go? And the answer is any darn way you can. It's like if somebody has to put the wooden spoon on your knuckles so you let go of the railing, so be it. But I think the message here is that I know that in any crisis there's something that people need to let go of. It may be possessions, it may be a person, it may be the way you thought life was going to be. It's different in different situations, but the letting go is very important because it's what creates space for the next thing to come in. And it's kind of a basic law of the universe of physics that, when a space is occupied, then something new can't come in. And so in talking about letting go in this book, what I'm just wanting to do is to make people aware of the fact that this is going to be part of the process. And then, maybe each person can be mindful, well, what is it I need to let go of, and to kind of heighten people's awareness that there is going to be something to let go of, be prepared for that, try to notice what it is, and then, by golly, try to let go of it or let yourself let go of it.
I know that on your book you have a nice little plug, if you will, from Marianne Williamson.
Yes,
she's
I
the author
do.
of A Return to Love, and we've had her on our program a couple of years ago, and it was interesting. I was listening to a lecture on tape with her, and what we're talking about here, about how the universe and how physics actually works when you say you let go of something to create the space to be filled by something else, a vacuum effect, if you will.
Yes, exactly.
And she says it's really interesting how, there are these people out there that want success, they want better lives, but yet they choose a role, and you chose a role, a little tiny part in Hill Street Blues. Yet the universe had something bigger for you, but you just weren't willing to let that little tiny part in Hill Street Blues go.
Right.
And I can say with conviction that when we talk about this letting something go, clearing space for something else to come in, for years, there was a time where I just kept getting furniture, and then I'd give it away when I was done using it, and then somehow something would fill its spot. I can't even remember if I even bought it sometimes.
Isn't it?
But it really is. It actually happens that way. And letting go, actually, especially as you describe it in your book, is one of those wonderful, mysterious practices of you just don't know what's going to come along next. That's a good reason for getting out of bed every day. No matter how bad things get.
I love the way you said about that, Daniel, that it's one of those mysterious practices, because when you start practicing it, you really begin to see how it works. And I've had times in my life when I've had a practice of letting go of 10 things every week, and it's just amazing how often the very same thing would show up in a different form. It's like the cosmos was saying, no, we do want you to have a beautiful drinking glass in the bathroom. No, we do want you to have a red skirt. Here's a new, better, more gorgeous one. And that when you practice that mysterious practice, as you call it so charmingly, you really get to see how incredibly it works.
Fascinating stuff. Now, as you've worked with people out there, what have been their responses to what you do, especially with this book here, The 10 Things to Do When Your Life Falls Apart?
Well, it's been so gratifying, Daniel, because what I see and hear and am told and written to about is just that, first of all, people are going through very hard times. They just, in a way, it seems to me, of all the years I've worked with people, kind of more generalized hard times than I've ever observed before. And what I'm experiencing in response is just so much gratitude, like, thank you for giving me something to hold on to so I can sort of have a map of what this experience is. And it applies to all kinds of situations, the loss of a relationship, the death of a child, the finishing of a job, the loss of a house. I mean, that the response is that these 10 things really do apply in all situations of loss, and that, and that it is so helpful to have some direction. I don't think we're a stubborn people. I don't think that we're unwilling to go through these hard experiences, but I think we need some help and direction, and that's the message I've gotten. Wow, this is helpful. Wow, I have a sense of direction. Wow, I have a sense of hope that I'll get through this. One woman said to me, wow, I feel really hopeful about this. I feel powerful. I feel like something good is actually somehow at the end of this going to happen to me. And so that's, of course, very gratifying, and it's wonderful that, people have that sense of making it through.
Now, you talk about defaults and self-sabotage. Now, describe what that is, what a default is.
Well, a default is, like on your computer, you have the default printer or the default typeface. It's like something that the computer reverts to when you don't specifically say, no, I want to pick my own. I'm going to consciously choose something different. And we all have default behaviors, which is just kind of our knee-jerk reaction to how we cope with life. And these defaults, as I teach at some length in this book, are, how they're all something that we've learned. They're how we respond based on our painful childhood experiences. And so, when the crisis comes up in your life, oftentimes what people do is just kind of revert to that same old behavior. Oh, well, it's hard, so I'm going to run to the refrigerator and have a pint of ice cream. Or it's hard, so I'm going to, go out to the bar and have a beer or watch TV till I'm in a stupor and then collapse. And, sometimes defaults are even very, kind of courageous. I'm going to keep a stiff upper lip, or I'm going to get control of this no matter what, But one of the things about a crisis is that it's asking us to look at who we are and to say, is this really the best way to do this? What might be more appropriate in this situation? What might you connect with in yourself that's deeper or more creative or more applicable in this situation that you can bring to the moment and that will, not only just help you make it through, but actually elevate you as a person or develop you as a person. So that's why it's important to look at our defaults.
Mm-hmm. It seems, too, that as you were talking about defaults as well, about how a crisis comes in and shakes us up, is that I came to, this is a personal conclusion of mine, that the reason a crisis happens is to shake us out of our routine of living, out of doing things the same way over and over and over again. And that's what you talk about in your book as well, as, you talk about doing something different. And a crisis has us see how we can sometimes do those things differently.
Yes, absolutely. And, we all do. Who was it? Will Rogers? I can't remember who deserves a footnote, but he said, choose your ruts carefully because you'll be in them for a long time. Isn't that great? Yeah, because we get in these places, it's like, okay, well, this feels pretty good. Let's hang out here. And so, we miss an opportunity for creativity and newness and possibility because the familiar is so darn familiar and comfortable usually. And so one of the gifts of crisis, of course, is that it can mobilize our creativity. It can put us in a place of, doing something different that we'd like to do, or that we wouldn't like to do, but that suddenly becomes available to us. And it's like, wow, now we can have a different experience of life. I think sometimes, a lot of people on their deathbeds say, wow, I wish I da-da-da-da, fill in the blank. It's like they didn't have the courage to get out of their rut. And I think those are the kinds of regrets that, that are very sad and that people want to, avoid having. And so in a way, a crisis is kind of an opportunity to say, okay, well, you might not have gone here, but here's your chance now to make something different happen.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating, as we were talking about earlier, if you really want to feel crisis and change and all kinds of other things, go into business for yourself. And
yes.
Just not too long ago, I was interviewing with a guy that was talking about Amish business people, and I thought, Amish business people? I thought they were just farmers. But anyway, the truth is they're building these businesses that in some cases become multi-million-dollar businesses.
Wow.
And this is a book that's really about, how the Amish do and practice business that can be practicable for anybody. But one of the things they talk about in this book that is so true is when you go into business, you'll generally have what they call well-intended relationships with people who discourage you from this. I'm sure you probably experienced that yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Stay with the job, keep it safe, but these are the same people wanting to win the lottery and this and that and the other. And the thing is that when you do, and I love to use business as an example because it stretches who we are in many different ways, but the fact is that you're going to make mistakes. Again, as we talked earlier, life is not linear, but there was an interesting quote that I picked up from a tape series years ago, and I can't remember who does it, but when I heard this, it actually gave me a small liberation, and that is simply, just imagine that in billions of years of evolution, nobody can screw up quite like you can.
That's great.
And I thought, that's perfection right there alone.
That is really great. Wonderful.
But I'm sure you've seen that experience, like, but nobody would have done it like that.
Right, exactly. We all have a, crisis creates new possibilities on the learning curve.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were actually inspired to write this book from a friend of yours. Could you tell us about that?
I was, Daniel. A dear, dear friend of mine from Europe had gone through a pile-up of crises. His wife had left. He'd had to move 2 times, like in the last 6 months. He'd lost his job. He'd just been diagnosed with a debilitating progressive illness, and we'd been friends for many years, and he said that he wanted to come to this lovely town that I live in and just kind of regroup and relax and unwind and heal. And so he came, and then as he was getting ready to leave, he just said to me kind of casually one day when we were hiking, he said, "Daphne, before I go home, would you tell me the 10 things I need to do to get through this crisis?" And I remember we were up in the mountains, and I kind of stumbled on a branch, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I heard this little voice in my head that's saying, that's practically like asking me to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that kind of sinking feeling like, oh, that's going to be a big project. And then when I came home, it's like these things just came to me immediately, and I realized that, in fact, this was a gift from my friend, that in asking that question, he was really asking, on a spiritual level on behalf of so many people. And so I, this was my response to his request. And of course, as I said, it was a gift because, his situation was the embodied reflection of so many people's situation, because so many of us are going through very hard times. So it was, it was a wonderful gift for me, and of course for everyone who benefits from this book from my dear friend.
Fascinating. For those of you just joining us, we're talking with Daphne Rose Kingma. The book is The 10 Things to Do When Your Life Falls Apart. And as many of us who are approaching midlife, again, there are a lot of things that are going on. I love the reason why we've been doing this program for now 6 years is we felt there was a need out there for basically talking with people who were basically approaching or in midlife because they're still highly active, but they're also a group that is going through such tremendous transition.
Yeah.
And most people at first were like, so this is a show for senior citizens. I said, no, it's not even there at all. In fact, I don't really want to go that far on the end of the spectrum. Not that there's anything less important about that, but I think this was an area that really people just weren't really understanding as well. They call them baby boomers, but once that phase is gone, you're still going to have people turning 50 years old and older,
Right, exactly.
And so we thought, well, the best way we could do is to bring this show to the light, to hear stories of other people who are going through these transitions so that basically our listening audience can realize I'm not alone in this. And one story really sticks out at me. It was a gal who authored a book about dealing with 3 generations of Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah.
and one of the things that stood out in the book is she says, as this was beginning to happen, she says, I just want my life back. And she says it was though God screamed back at her to say, this is your life. What are you going to do about it?
Wow. That's so profound and telling, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we always have this kind of internal reference of what normal is, this theoretical normal, that really doesn't exist. I mean, that's so beautifully and powerfully expressed in this woman's experience, hearing those words. It's like, this is it, And I think that, it's in that resting in the experience we're having and coming to the fullness of who we are in that moment and not denying and not, setting aside. I mean, that is the process of integration, and we kind of drop down more and more into our depths, both as personalities, because we see what our talents are and what we really have to bring to these situations. But also on a spiritual level, we connect with our souls. We see, that there is this quiet, eternal place inside ourselves that's always there whenever we drop in to check in and experience and feel that. And it's just so, so empowering and so harmony creating.
Now, in your book, basically what you're saying in essence here is that you go where the love is. Why is love so powerful?
Love is so powerful because it's the highest vibrational energy in the universe. I mean, that's another thing that's been demonstrated, by scientists and physicists who can measure these mysterious, quantify these mysterious things, like energy. And we all have a sense of that. We all know how incredibly powerful the energy of love is. That's why we want to fall in love. That's why we feel so beautiful and powerful and enlightened and delighted and peaceful when we fall in love. And so, one of the temptations when a person is in crisis is to be immobilized and to be isolated and to crawl in the shell and pull the rug up over you. And it's exactly the opposite experience that we need to create, because being in the energy of love uplifts us and transforms us and creates new possibilities. And I was talking with a woman the other day. She had a whole bunch of just excruciating crises she'd been through, just, horrendous illness, loss of a job, etc. And she said, I just made it a practice every day to get myself out of my house, to go to the grocery store, to go someplace and say hello to every person I met and to ask them their names, so that the next time I saw them, I would feel connected to them and I'd be able to speak their name to them and acknowledge that connection. And she said immediately she started feeling better.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that a fact? Especially if you have been in a relationship, it breaks up, and now you have a choice. You can crawl under the covers, keep the TV on, and drink yourself into oblivion, or you can get out, start engaging with other people, maybe even asking other people out, not necessarily to date, but just to spend time with somebody.
Yes.
And you're so true that does make you feel better.
Yes, or asking them how they are, because one of the things about a crisis is that we always feel like, I'm the only one in hell, and that the minute, I'm just always blown away by it, even after all these years of doing very intense and deep work with people. You see a beautiful person or a simple person or just somebody you pass on the street, and you think, oh, they're just having a regular life, and then you can stop and ask them 3 questions, and it's just amazing what all of us are going through. We may not be going through it right this minute, and we certainly don't look like we're going through it, most of us, but it's just astonishing what each human being has carried in their life. And so when we connect in that place of, discovering what another person is carrying or has carried, we suddenly feel the community of our spirits, and we don't feel alone anymore. It's like, oh, they're in their anguish too, It's like we're in this together.
Yeah, in fact, in your book you talk about how one of these things were resolved by creating what was known as a cuddle group.
Yes.
I thought that was so cute.
That is cute. I know. There's actually one in my town. That's where I first learned about it. And these people just said it was unbearable to keep going through everything without experiencing human touch or human connection, and they just got all these giant pillows and huddled and cuddled together, and they all said it was just amazing how much better they felt, just like, being in a moment of hibernation with other bodies and souls that were just present with them in a very nurturing, quiet way.
It must be fascinating to do what you do, which to me seems to be going out and teaching people the importance of love.
it is so fascinating, and it is such an incredible privilege, Daniel. I think that the world, I guess, what is it? John Lennon said it, what the world needs now is love. What the world has always needed is love. And I think that one of the things that always humbles me is, how many people were not loved well. What a hunger there is for love. What a great, powerful, huge, gaping need for love there is. And I feel very blessed because in my life and background, my parents, I realize more as I go on past 50, that my parents each had a very unique capacity for love. We had other great hardships in my growing up in my family, but they weren't about love. And so that's my gift to give. I feel like I was well loved, and so I have a sense of what that energy is like. And I love to project it. I love to teach it. I love to show people how it operates and what it feels like. And it's just an incredible privilege. I feel so honored and blessed that this is my mission in life.
So that would put you on the list of the top 10 spiritual advisors that Oprah Winfrey goes to.
Well, not quite, not yet. She lives a few blocks from me, actually. Well, I could say some things about that. My sense is she is a great spirit who's generating incredible healing and awareness in her work in life, and I would love to see her personally experience more love. That would be my great wish for her.
Mm-hmm. Nothing like reciprocity when it comes to love, huh?
Yes, so true, so true. And it's like love is the one thing that, it's very paradoxical. We can never get enough of it, and we can never run out of it.
Fascinating. The book is The 10 Things to Do When Your Life Falls Apart. Our guest today, Daphne Rose Kingma. Your website is daphnekingma.com?
Yes.
Okay, tell us about that.
daphnekingma.com. And let me spell my interesting and often hard to spell names, Daphne, and the last name is Kingma, Kingma. It does not have an N on it, as many people imagine. daphnekingma.com. My website, of course, features this book and then the many other books that I've written about love and relationships, that one that I talked about earlier, Coming Apart, wonderful book about men, many other books about many facets of love and relationship. And this book can be ordered through my website, through Amazon, of course. It's in the bookstores, although I understand it's sold out in many bookstores. I've had complaints about that, so it's not available. That's a good complaint to have.
It sure is.
But, of course, bookstores can order it, and, of course, you can get it through Amazon. And I also, consult with people. That's available through my website, too, and I speak and do workshops, and there's information about that there also.
Daphne, are you an angel?
Oh, I hope so. I hope I have big wings and shed a lot of light. That nothing could be better. And I want to say to you, Daniel, from my heart, that I just want to thank you for the beautiful work that you're doing, for acknowledging people in midlife, and for the wisdom that we hold, and the journey that we've taken, and the different kinds of needs that we have, and to make your work an instrument of healing and benefit and awareness for this, special time of life that has its own gifts and its own challenges.
Well, I really enjoyed doing this work just because of the opportunity that I have to talk with wonderful people like you, to show people out there there's a hell of a lot more good going on out there than bad. But, boy, it seems funny when the bad comes along, you think that that's all that's happening.
Yes, that's right. And that's why I'm so happy to have written this book, to offer encouragement and hope in those very hard times.
Daphne Kingma, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. A pleasure.
Thank you, Daniel. What a joy.
You bet. DaphneKingma.com is the website. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks.
We also encourage you, the listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com. Be sure to sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter as well. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past